Hey there, thank you for joining me for another episode of Total Ramblings. This week we are looking at Doctor Who. We are looking at the latest episode that has just come out. It's just before 9 o'clock on Saturday the 17th of May 2025. I believe this is the penultimate episode of this season. I could be wrong, but I think it is. And needless to say, there are going to be some massive spoilers here. I'm going to be giving you a detailed plot summary and my initial thoughts. I've literally just finished watching the episode. It's been out less than an hour. And this episode is called the Interstellar Song Contest. So, we start with an opening scene or an opening establishing shot. We are at the Harmony Arena, which is a gigantic space station in space, funnily enough, best place for a space station. And it's the 803rd Interstellar Song Contest, hosted by UK host Rylan Clark. So I'm just going to make myself a little note here because I need to ask a question at the end of this. And I don't want to forget it, but I don't also want to kind of give away the ending of the episode quite yet. Obviously, if you haven't seen this episode yet, you probably want to come back to watching me afterwards. Yes. Anyway, we're in this massive, massive arena with tens of thousands of people, beings, alien life forms, basically attending this show, and the TARDIS arrives in a conveniently empty booth, and basically the Doctor and Belinda have arrived to take a Vindicator reading because they're still trying to find their way back to Earth. Belinda says when she hears someone talking on the stage, is that Rylan? And they look at the screen and it's Rylan, who is a 21st century television host here in the UK, if I didn't mention that already. And the Doctor and Belinda both say, well, that's it, we're staying. We have the opening title sequence, and we see that Mrs. Flood is in the audience, and she's very interested in what the Doctor's doing. And the Doctor and Belinda are enjoying the show, and the Doctor says, one of them says it's proof that the Earth survives, because basically the Eurovision Song Contest has gone interstellar and the whole universe is now involved, apparently. They see an advert for something called Poppy Honey, who are the sponsors. Basically, the Doctor sort of says, well, this is the final link we need. This is the final sort of triangulation we need for the Vindicator. So we should be able to get back to the May the 24th now on Earth, 2025. Meanwhile, outside, two guys named Gary and Mike are trying to get into their booth. The conveniently empty booth is theirs, and their ticket won't let them in. And they go up to one of these sort of weird sort of robotic guards, one of these drones, and they say, are you going to help us get into this booth? Because they can see that the Doctor and Belinda are inside, and basically they've had their seats stolen. And all the drone says is, phase 1 is activated, and he walks off. And then all the drones kind of say, phase 1 activated. And then basically we have a guy enters the production gallery and takes it over, and he claims that he is a Hellion from the planet Hellia, and he has horns coming out of his head like this, and his name is Kid. And we've already seen a Hellion in the gallery operating some of the equipment, and she's in on it too, and her name is Win. All while this is going on, the sort of Kid basically kicks on, sort of switches over to the dress rehearsal, because obviously the show is now being sort of disrupted and Rylan can't get through to the gallery. Now Rylan's not in the dress rehearsal because apparently he was still in deep freeze. So the Doctor's in the booth and he sees Rylan and his co-host on the stage, but he only sees the co-host on the stage and the screen because now the broadcast is the dress rehearsal. And we have some interesting references here. We have a reference to the planet Tryon, which is the planet where Turlough came from. Turlough, the Fifth Doctor's companion from the 1980s. We also have reference to Alpha Centauri, and we have reference to a place called the Zygon New Habitat. Anyway, the Doctor, seeing that the images on the screen and on the stage don't match, starts fiddling around with some equipment to work out what's going on and what's causing the wrong signal to be shown. Meanwhile, up in the gallery, they deactivate the safety protocols, and the force field holding the air in the space station is deactivated, and now the arena is open to space. And in an absolutely stunning scene that I can't, in my head, right, I can see how this would look in a 1970s episode of Tom Baker Doctor Who. And I can just imagine how naff this would be given 1970s Doctor Who budgets. We see all the people being sucked up into space. It kind of reminds me a little bit of World War Z, the zombie film, which, by the way, has nothing to do with the book. The book is amazing. The film is trash. But you kind of, when you see that pyramid of zombies climbing up over the wall, you kind of get a similar effect with this sort of funnel of people being kind of pushed out into space. I would say sucked up into space, but technically speaking, that's not correct, because it's the pressure pushing them up into the vacuum of space. This includes the Doctor and the TARDIS. Everything kind of gets pulled up out of this, sort of pushed up out of this air bubble into space. Wynne, meanwhile, she presses a button surreptitiously and closes the lids of all the booths, which, as it happens, protects Belinda, because she's kind of jammed up against the ceiling of the booth. The Doctor's kind of pushed out into space. She's jammed up against the ceiling, and when the booth shuts, she kind of falls to the floor. So she is now sort of protected with the Doctor out in space. We have a very amusing shot of Rylan as he freezes, and he's looking at his hand freeze, and he's like, oh, not again, because he's only just been unfrozen, I guess. In the gallery now, with the arena essentially empty, the Hellion, the terrorist kid, says, "Fetch the device." And basically the production assistant, or sorry, the producer, director, whatever she might be, the lady in charge of the show in the gallery, she basically says, well, that the Mavity shell is still on. Those people are still alive. So we're still calling gravity Mavity because of that correction that Isaac Newton made when the Doctor bumped into him. And so that's, nice little touch. It's Mavity now. But the kid says, no, we're sort of proceeding with my plan. We don't know what the plan is yet, of course. Belinda now runs into the Tryon sort of delegation, and they were due to sing. And she kind of says, well, can't we ask for help? And the Tryon, Cora, reveals that the station is in lockdown. It's in a close down because of gambling rules. Basically, while the show is on, nobody can transmit in or out. Otherwise, they could be cheating on the outcome of the song contest. So they can't call for help. And Belinda, and I don't know whether this is in character for her or not, she basically freaks out because she's on her own. She doesn't know where she is. The Doctor isn't with her. And, she kind of freaks out a little bit. Meanwhile, they discover that the computer is being overwritten with some kind of code that they don't recognise. Now, things get interesting. We cut to the Doctor in space, and he is slowly freezing up. And I think this is going to blow a lot of people's minds. The Doctor starts to hear voices of a woman calling him, telling him to go back. And he's getting images, and it looks like a woman stood in front of one of the internal doors of the TARDIS, and the woman is Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, who hasn't been in the series since 1983, The Five Doctors, and who wasn't in the series before that after 1964. Susan, the Doctor's granddaughter, calling him grandfather, telling him to go back, saying, "Find me." So the Doctor kind of sparks out of his, his being frozen, I guess, and swims in space, presumably using air currents that are left, towards a confetti gun, and grabs a confetti gun, and much like Wally in the film WALL-E, where he grabs a fire extinguisher in space, the Doctor propels himself back towards Harmony Arena using this confetti gun, whereupon Gary and Mike help him get back on board through the airlock. And the Doctor reveals that everyone is still alive. They're in gravitic suspension. There's 100,000 people floating in space. But they're just floating there. They can't get them back. Anyway, meanwhile, back in the gallery, the Hellions Kid and Wynne are setting up something for the Tryon song, which was due to be song 14 by the Tryon delegation led by Cora. And basically, it's revealed that on Hellier there were fields of these things called hell poppies. The Doctor, back on the station now, hacks the computer, and there's a very high-pitched sound comes out of the computer, which he has to sort of stop because it's crippling to everybody. And he says it's a delta wave. Basically, the computer is building up to a delta wave, which it will transmit to everyone watching the Interstellar Song Contest, and there are 3 trillion people watching, and it's going to kill them all. The bit of the station that they're in is the museum for the song contest, and they meet a Graham Norton hologram. Now this is quite appropriate because I don't know if you recall, during the very first episode of the Doctor Who revival in 2005, there was a bit of a mess up with the BBC, and some of the audio was combined, and you could hear Graham Norton talking over the first episode of Doctor Who. I believe this was actually retconned into the novelisation of Rose, the episode in question. So now Graham Norton has been in Doctor Who properly. Just quite a funny scene with Graham Norton sort of talking with everybody. And the Doctor, he keeps seeing Susan in his head, calling him grandfather, telling him to sort of go back. And the Doctor hacks the system and starts talking to Kid through the intercom. And Belinda's also in a separate location watching this, and Belinda realises the Doctor's alive and is very relieved. And Kid says, "Who am I talking to?" The Doctor says, "The last of the Time Lords," to which Kid says, "That's a good name for a band." Anyway, the Doctor is quite extreme here. He's threatening Kid. He's threatening to kill him. And Belinda's very concerned because she says, "That's not the Doctor." Then, to no one's surprise, we reveal that Cora is a Hellion. Now, Cora had very sort of built-up hair, and I thought maybe it was hiding horns underneath. But in fact, no. She's had the horns chopped off at the back of her neck. Now, the only thing that occurs to me here is surely she would have a hairdresser, and would not the hairdresser have noticed the fact that she's got stumps of horns in the back of her head, and wouldn't they know that she was a Hellion? And it turns out that Hellions are reviled in the universe. They're regarded as scum. The Hellions, for some reason, they're not allowed to sing. They're very much a lower class. And it turns out the planet Hellier was bought by a corporation, including the entire population. They bought the whole planet, including all the people, in order to harvest the hell poppy, which brings us back to the advert that we saw earlier, the poppy honey advert. And basically, they bought the planet, they wanted the poppy sort of flavouring, and then they torched the planet. And essentially, Kid the Hellion is wanting revenge against the corporation that destroyed his planet, because because the corporation is sponsoring the Interstellar Song Contest. He wants basically to kill the 3 trillion people who are watching, so that this massacre will be kind of in the name of the corporation, if you like. Len, who is Cora's friend in the Tryon delegation, now refuses to help Cora because he knows what she is. She is a Hellion, and everyone seems to think Hellions are scum. And Belinda, as I say, she's very concerned that the Doctor is angry. There's a particular scene where the Doctor's messing around with a computer with Gary and Mike, who are now very nervous of him, and a couple of drones approach from behind, and the Doctor uses a sonic to blow their heads off. And the Doctor finds out that Mike was a medic and Gary was a technical designer on the song contest, and he says, Gary, and Gary looks very nervous, and Mike looks very nervous. The Doctor says, I like you. And the look of relief on Gary and Mike's faces, and Gary says, oh, thank God, because, you know, they realise this man's very dangerous, right? But he seems to like them. Anyway, the Doctor makes his way to the gallery, but when he gets shot by Kid, the vision of the Doctor that appears is just a hologram. The real Doctor is now sat at the control desk in the gallery and has Kid's device, which is slowly working its way up to 100% to release this delta wave. The Doctor basically says that he is able to create hard light holograms, and I'm thinking this is kind of like a steal from Red Dwarf, right? Because we had Rimmer in Red Dwarf, who was a hologram, and then after, I think, series 6, he became solid. He was made of hard light, so he could now interact with devices and things, even though there were some continuity errors, and he could do so before that. But never mind. Let's move on from that. It's Red Dwarf. It's not meant to be hard sci-fi. But anyway, the Doctor is now says, well, I can make a hard light hologram, and the Doctor uncharacteristically starts torturing Kid using this glove that he's got that can control this hard light hologram of the Doctor, and he keeps torturing Kid. Belinda arrives, and the Doctor sees her and stops, realising what he's done and realising that she is in fact safe and she is still alive. And we can see that Belinda realises what the Doctor is capable of when he's angry. And later the Doctor sort of says, it was the 3 trillion people potentially dying that triggered me, because all these people would have died in an instant, and my people, the Time Lords, died in an instant. And it's kind of interesting that we've got these Time Lord references keep coming up in this episode, plus Susan, which leads us into what's going to happen at the end. Anyway, the Doctor realises that they can reconfigure the hard light generator to turn into a tractor beam, and they pull Rylan back in, and they put him back in his booth where he was frozen, and they managed to revive him safely. And the Doctor says to Gary and Mike, we need to do this 100,000 times. We need to pull back each person, put them in the booth, and revive them. And then they managed to speed the process up by converting the big viewing booth that the TARDIS landed in into a chamber where multiple people can be put and multiple people can be revised at once. And all the while this is happening, we've got a previous UK Eurovision winning song called Making Your Mind Up by Bucks Fizz playing, which was nice. Cora then goes on stage and sings, having revealed that she's from Hellier. She gets some chants and boos and jeers from the audience, but she sings a very nice song. And while she's singing the song, we kind of see Hellier burning. The whole planet's on fire, basically. And to start with, everyone is silent. There's no applause. But then Gary and Mike start the applause, and she gets the applause that she kind of deserves. We then have the sort of the wrap-up scenes. The TARDIS has now been recovered, and Belinda and the Doctor are back in the museum area of the arena where the TARDIS has been put. And Graham Norton's hologram pops up again, And Graham Norton reveals that the Earth died many, many years ago on the 24th of May, 2025, and it died in a second, much like how the Doctor said Gallifrey died in a second. Cause unknown, and basically all of the stuff from the song contest was kind of scraped up from the remains of the Earth and sort of recreated, if you like. So basically, and all this happened, as I say, next week on May the 24th. So the Doctor and Belinda, they still can't get back to Earth. Although the Vindicators got all the readings, they get on board the TARDIS and there's sort of horrible sort of screeching sounds and what have you. And the cloister bell starts to sound. Belinda says, "What's that noise?" And the Doctor says, "That's the noise of May 24th, 2025. And then we go in, and then the TARDIS doors explode inwards, and we cut to the closing credits. But almost immediately, we have a mid-credit scene with Gary and Mike reviving Mrs. Flood. She's the last person that they've pulled in with the tractor beam. She's put into the booth, and she's revived. And Mrs. Flood's asking, where's the Doctor? What's happened? And she says her double brainstem was frozen. And then she says this is quite bad news for a time lady. So she's a Time Lord. And she starts to regenerate. And then in the second massive mega twist of this episode, she not only regenerates, she bigenerates, much like the Doctor did, into two people. And she's the Rani. And I'd like to say hi to my friend Pete Reed, who bet me £1 that Mrs. Flood was the Rani, and I said I'll take that bet, and now I owe him £1. Hi Pete, will you take PayPal? Anyway, the new person, the Rani, says, well, we're both the Rani, but I am the Rani. Mrs. Flood, she is just a Rani. And it's weird because Mrs. Flood is now very subservient to the Rani and is kind of, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, that kind of thing. Yeah. So we've got the Doctor, last of the Time Lords, seeing visions from his granddaughter, Susan, who is a Time Lord. And now we have the Rani, who is a Time Lord. Are we looking at the return of Gallifrey at some point in the future? People have been saying the Rani was going to come back for 20 years, and everyone's been saying, no. People don't know who she is. She's irrelevant, blah, blah. Well, she's back now. The Rani's back. So, this episode, very colourful, very expensive. The crowd scenes in particular, I can't imagine the computing power required to generate those. This feels to me like an early Eccleston or first David Tennant run Doctor 10 kind of story in terms of its scope and feel and the use of music and the events that are happening with lots of alien species in one place. It feels like an Eccleston or a Tennant story. This Doctor, Ncuti Gatwa, is very camp. There's lots of people calling each other darling and love and stuff like that. And I'd say Eurovision, being quite a camp institution, contest, this is the perfect embodiment for this particular Doctor. This is the perfect kind of story for this Doctor. And as I've already said, I can't imagine this being done. Well, no, I can. I can imagine this being a Tom Baker story, set in some very small sets, maybe using the Top of the Pops set with a few sort of random aliens around. I can just imagine this trying to be done on a 1970s budget, and it makes me smile. Not in mockery, but it just makes me smile. I just can't help be thinking, how would this story have been done in the 1970s and or without Disney money, right? Because the crowd scenes in particular, particularly the scene where they're all sort of sucked into space, it's just like the amount of money on the screen is just ridiculous, right? And I can't help thinking of this trying to be made in the 70s. Because in the 70s, you know, Eurovision was quite popular back then. It was the era of ABBA and all that kind of thing. And I can just kind of picture this. I don't know why I keep thinking of this. I just do. It's making me funny. It's making me laugh. But one thing I will say is the Earth got destroyed, apparently, in a week's time. So I might not see you guys next week because I might not be here. This could be my last week on Earth. It could be everyone's last week on Earth. It could be the last week of the Earth, right? How did Rylan survive? How did he survive? Yeah. It's interesting at the beginning they call him the immortal Ryan. Does he often get cracked out for shows like this? But how did he survive the destruction of the Earth? Was he just conveniently in a frozen booth? Did they pick up his body afterwards? I mean, we've seen like a taxi in the Eiffel Tower and stuff like that floating through space. So I guess it wasn't vaporized. So maybe individual people survived. I don't know. But that's just my only question, is how did Rylan survive? Anyway, an amusing episode. Very colourful. Very, very camp. With some interesting twists and turns. I quite enjoyed it. It was funny. Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot. I can imagine there will be some people who don't like it. There will be some Doctor Who fans who will say that the Doctor's being too camp, that the whole episode was too camp, and they hate Eurovision, therefore they hate this, and they hate Mrs. Flood being the Rani, and they hate Susan coming back, and they hate. There's a... I'm going to go off on a tangent here. There's a joke that says nobody hates Star Wars as much as Star Wars fans. I would almost say the same of Doctor Who. In this age of social media and everything, and including videos like this, of me doing stuff to camera, right? Of me rambling on. It's all social media, right? But in era like this, everyone, including me, has a say, and you know, even idiots, including me, have airtime, right? In the past, you know, books and things would get published, and that was kind of the way of getting information. But there was always a barrier. Like, not every monkey could just go out there and write a book and actually get their views out into the world. And now, in the age of social media, where everyone's got access to everything, even the views of idiots get out there. And I class myself amongst those, right? And so, you know, everything, what I'm trying to say is that everybody's view can be propagated just as easily as everybody else's, and as a result, social media has made this planet very divided and divisive, because in the past it might just be kind of peer-reviewed kind of thoughts and treatises and essays and things that might get disseminated, and now everything gets out there, including crap like this from myself, right? And so basically this is why we have so many arguments these days, because everybody has a say without a filter. Does that make sense? And I am including myself here, and I have no doubt that me going off about this and off about social media, and because my views didn't precisely align with those of somebody else watching this, I'm probably going to get unsubscribed again, because Doctor Who fans are a funny lot, as are Star Wars fans, as are fans of everything, because everybody can have their say without this filter and can just get online and have an audience, right? And it's kind of... yeah, like I say, we live in such a polarised world. I'm not really sure how we can get around that, because how do you stop idiots like me talking? How do you get the right viewpoints out? I've gone off on a tangent now. I'm rambling, but this is Total Ramblings, and that's the nature of this kind of vlog, really. So I'm going to shut up now, because I'm not really sure of the point I was trying to make, other than the fact that there will be some people who didn't like this episode, and I thought it was fine. Anyway, thanks very much for watching this episode of Total Ramblings. I will see you in the next one. Don't know what that's going to be. Could be a Lego episode, could be a Life episode, could be the next Doctor Who episode. I just don't know. Anyway, thanks very much for watching. Please do all the usual YouTube-y stuff, like, subscribe, comment, share, unsubscribe, hate me, do whatever you like, blah, blah, blah. See you in the next one. Bye-bye.